There is a profound wisdom in knowing when to extend your hand and when to keep it at your side. The ancient Stoics understood this truth with crystalline clarity that not every soul is worthy of your energy. Not every cry for help deserves your response, and not every person who claims to need you truly does. Marcus Aurelius, writing in his personal reflections, warned us that we must guard our inner citadel as fiercely as any fortress. For once breached by the wrong influences, it becomes nearly impossible to restore. In the flickering light of Roman oil lamps, these philosophers discovered something that modern society has forgotten. Helping the wrong people is not compassionate, is self-destruction. It is the slow erosion of your virtue, the gradual weakening of your resolve, and the silent theft of your peace. They learned through experience and observation that certain types of individuals operate like spiritual parasites, feeding on the goodness of others while giving nothing in return but chaos, manipulation, and exhaustion. Seneca wrote, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." And in the context of human relationships, this means that sometimes we must end our assistance to toxic individuals in order to begin our journey toward true wisdom and inner strength. The Stoics were not cold or heartless. They were practical philosophers who understood that energy is finite, that virtue must be protected, and that helping someone who refuses to help themselves is like pouring water into a vessel with no bottom. The first type of person the Stoics would counsel you to avoid helping is the one who thrives on perpetual victimhood. This individual has made suffering their identity, complaint their language, and helplessness their permanent residence. They do not seek solutions, they seek audiences. They do not want to climb out of their pit, they want you to climb down into it with them. Marcus Aurelius observed that very little is needed to make a happy life. Yet these individuals have convinced themselves that happiness is impossible, that circumstances are always against them, and that everyone else is responsible for their pain except themselves. When you attempt to help such a person, you quickly discover that they have an answer for every solution. It's an excuse for every opportunity, and a reason why every path forward is blocked. They are not genuinely seeking assistance. They are seeking validation for their decision to remain powerless. Epictetus, who knew genuine hardship as a slave, taught that it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. The perpetual victim has chosen their reaction long before circumstances even unfold. And no amount of your energy, advice, or resources will change their fundamental commitment to helplessness, your compassion. When directed towards such individuals, becomes enablement. Your assistance becomes complicity in their self-destruction. The Stoics understood that true strength sometimes requires the discipline to watch someone struggle without intervening, particularly when that struggle is self-imposed and your intervention only prolongs their suffering. There is a profound difference between helping someone who has fallen and trying to carry someone who refuses to walk, closely related to the perpetual victim is the individual who has mastered the art of emotional manipulation, the person who uses guilt, shame, and manufactured urgency to extract resources, time, and energy from others. This type operates like a skilled thief, stealing not through force, but through the exploitation of your moral sensibilities. They understand your desire to be good, to be helpful, to be seen as compassionate, and they weaponize these noble impulses. Against you, Seneca warned against those who make a profit from our losses. And the emotional manipulator profits immensely from your emotional vulnerability. They create crises that only you can solve, emergencies that require immediate attention, and situations where saying no makes you appear cruel or uncaring. They are masters of timing, often approaching you when you are tired, stressed, or emotionally compromised, knowing that your defenses are lowered and your judgment clouded. The manipulation is subtle but devastating. They never directly demand, they imply. They never threaten, they simply make you aware of terrible consequences that will surely follow if you do not act. They never take responsibility, they simply create situations where you feel responsible for outcomes that were never truly under your control. The Stoics recognize this pattern as a form of psychological warfare, one that destroys the helper more thoroughly than the one claiming to need help. Marcus Aurelius taught that you have power over your mind, not outside. events. Realize this, and you will find strength. The emotional manipulator seeks to convince you that you have power over outcomes that are actually beyond your control, while simultaneously removing your power over the one thing you can control, your own choices and responses. They invert the fundamental principle of Stoic philosophy, making you feel responsible for everything except your own well-being. Another category of individual whom the Stoics would advise you to avoid helping is the one consumed by envy and resentment toward your success, peace, or progress. This person does not seek assistance to elevate themselves, they seek to diminish you. Their requests for help are actually attempts to drain your energy, waste your time, and create obstacles to your own advancement. They operate under the delusion that your loss somehow constitutes their gain, that your struggles somehow ease their pain. Epictetus understood this dynamic well, having observed it in both slavery and freedom. He noted that wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. Yet the envious person wants everything you have while appreciating nothing they possess. They cannot celebrate your victories because they view them as evidence of their own inadequacy. They cannot support your growth because they interpret it as abandonment. They cannot be grateful for your help because gratitude would require acknowledging your worth, which their ego cannot tolerate. When you help someone driven by envy, you feed the very poison that destroys them. Your success becomes their torment. Your peace becomes their agitation, and your virtue becomes their accusation against themselves. The Stoics taught that such individuals must be left to wrestle with their own demons, not because you lack compassion, but because your intervention only intensifies their internal conflict. There exists also the individual who mistakes activity for progress, motion for movement, and busyness for productivity. This person is always in crisis, always overwhelmed, always juggling more than they can handle, yet they never seem to make meaningful progress toward any goal. They seek help not to solve problems, but to manage the chaos they have created through poor judgment, lack of priorities, refusal to make difficult decisions. Seneca wrote extensively about the proper use of time, understanding it as our most precious and finite resource. He observed that it is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it. The chronically overwhelmed person has made waste their way of life, inefficiency their operating system, and chaos their comfort zone. They do not want help organizing their life. They want help managing their disorganization. When you assist such individuals, you become complicit in their dysfunction. You enable their poor judgment by cushioning its consequences. You validate their chaos by helping them navigate it rather than transcend it. The Stoics understood that some people must be allowed to experience the full weight of their choices before they develop the motivation to make better ones. Perhaps most dangerous of all is the individual who actively undermines, sabotages, or opposes your efforts to live according to virtue and wisdom. This person may present themselves as a friend, family member, or colleague, but their actions consistently work against your growth, peace, and moral development. They mock your principles, discourage your progress, and create obstacles to your philosophical practice. Marcus Aurelius warned against such individuals in his Meditations, noting that the best revenge is not to be like your enemy. The person who opposes your virtue often does so because your growth highlights their stagnation. Your peace contrasts with their turmoil, and your strength exposes their weaknesses. They cannot tolerate your evolution because it reminds them of their own potential, which they have chosen to abandon. These individuals operate through subtle discouragement, constant criticism, and the promotion of doubt about your path. They question your motivations, minimize your achievements, and suggest that your commitment to virtue is somehow naive, impractical, or unsustainable. They are invested in keeping you at their level because your elevation threatens their worldview. Stoics understood that helping such a person is impossible because they do not want to be helped. They want to prevent you from helping yourself. Your energy directed toward them is energy stolen from your own development. Your time spent trying to lift them up is time that could be spent solidifying your own foundation. There is also the individual who has made comfort their god and convenience their master. This person seeks help not to grow stronger but to remain weak. They want assistance that removes challenges rather than builds capacity to meet them. They desire solutions that require no effort on their part, growth that demands no sacrifice, and strength that costs no struggle. Epictetus, forged in the crucible of slavery and hardship, taught that difficulties are things that show a person what they are. The comfort seeker wants to avoid this revelation at all costs. They prefer the illusion of progress to the reality of struggle, the appearance of strength to the discipline required to develop it. When you help someone avoid necessary struggles, you rob them of the opportunity to discover their own capacity. You deprive them of the satisfaction that comes only through overcoming obstacles through their own efforts. The Stoics recognized that true compassion sometimes requires allowing people to face their challenges alone, to discover their inner resources, and to develop the confidence that comes only through personal victory over adversity. The individual who consistently breaks promises, abandons commitments, and fails to honor their word represents another category. The Stoics would counsel you to avoid helping. This person operates without integrity, making agreements they have no intention of keeping and requesting assistance they have no plan to reciprocate. They view relationships as transactions where they receive maximum benefit while providing minimum value. Seneca emphasized the importance of keeping one's word, understanding that integrity forms the foundation of all meaningful relationships and personal peace. He wrote, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. And for the unreliable person, every commitment ends before it truly begins." They make promises to obtain help, then break those promises once the help is received. Such individuals teach you to doubt your own judgment, to second-guess your instincts, and to lower your standards for acceptable behavior. They normalize dysfunction and make reliability seem unreasonable. The Stoics understood that helping someone who lacks integrity is like building on sand, no matter how much effort you invest. The foundation will eventually give way. Another type the ancient philosophers would warn against helping is the individual who refuses to acknowledge reality, who lives in denial of obvious truths, and who demands that others participate in their delusions. This person has created an alternate version of events, circumstances, or relationships that bears little resemblance to actual conditions. Yet they insist that their perception is accurate and that anyone who disagrees is mistaken, malicious, or misguided. Marcus Aurelius taught the importance of seeing things as they truly are. Writing, "Confine yourself to the present." The reality denier cannot confine themselves to the present because the present contradicts their preferred narrative. They cannot accept truth because truth requires change, and change requires effort they are unwilling to make. When you attempt to help someone who refuses to acknowledge reality, you find yourself drawn into their distorted worldview. You begin to question your own perceptions, doubt your own experiences, and wonder if perhaps their version of events might be correct. This psychological manipulation erodes your confidence in your own judgment and weakens your connection to truth. The final type of toxic individual the Stoics would advise you to avoid helping is perhaps the most dangerous. The person who actively seeks to corrupt others, who finds satisfaction in leading good people astray, and who measures their success by the moral compromises they can extract from others. This individual is not merely weak or struggling, they are actively destructive, seeking to pull others down to their level rather than climbing up to a higher one. Such individuals operate through temptation, peer pressure, and the gradual erosion of standards. They mock virtue, celebrate vice, and create environments where doing the right thing becomes increasingly difficult. They understand that most people want to belong, to be accepted, to avoid conflict, and they exploit these natural desires to promote behavior that ultimately destroys peace, integrity, and self-respect. The Stoics recognize that proximity to such individuals is itself corrupting, that their influence operates like a slow poison, that maintaining one's virtue in their presence requires enormous energy that could be better spent on positive pursuits. They understood that sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do for such a person is to remove the opportunity for them to corrupt you. As your corruption serves no one and helps nothing, Seneca wrote, the willing destiny guides them. The unwilling destiny drags them. Those who actively seek to corrupt others have chosen to be dragged by their worst impulses. And no amount of help from you will change their fundamental orientation toward destruction. Your energy is better spent becoming an example of virtue than trying to reform someone committed to vice. The wisdom of the Stoics in identifying these toxic patterns is not rooted in judgment or condemnation. It is rooted in practical wisdom and self-preservation. They understood that your capacity to help others depends entirely on maintaining your own strength, virtue, and peace. When you allow toxic individuals to drain your energy, corrupt your judgment, or compromise your values, you become less capable of helping anyone, including yourself. Marcus Aurelius reflected deeply on the balance between compassion and wisdom, between helping others and protecting oneself. He understood that the truly wise person helps from a position of strength, not weakness, from abundance, not scarcity, from virtue, not compromise. He wrote, "The universe is change. Our life is what our thoughts make it, and the toxic individuals we have discussed seek to change your thoughts in ways that diminish your life." The path of the Stoic is not one of isolation or indifference, is one of discernment. You help those who genuinely seek help, who take responsibility for their growth, who honor their commitments, and who operate from good faith. You avoid helping those who seek to use your goodness against you, who mistake your strength for weakness, and who view your compassion as an opportunity for exploitation. This discernment is not learned overnight. It requires experience, reflection, and the willingness to make difficult decisions. It requires you to disappoint people who expect it, you to continue enabling their dysfunction. It requires you to endure the accusations of selfishness from those who benefited from your previous lack of boundaries. It requires you to trust your judgment even when others question it. But this discernment also leads to something profound: the preservation of your inner citadel, the protection of your virtue, and the maintenance of your capacity to genuinely help those who deserve it. When you stop wasting your energy on those who cannot be helped, you discover how much more you have to offer those who can be. When you stop compromising your values to accommodate toxic behavior, you realize how much stronger your values have become. The Stoics taught that life is short, energy is finite, and virtue is precious. They understood that every moment spent trying to fix someone who refuses to be fixed is a moment stolen from your own growth, your own peace, and your own potential to contribute something meaningful to the world. They learned that sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is walk away. The most loving thing you can do is say no, and the most helpful thing you can do is stop helping. In the end, the ancient wisdom is simple but profound. Protect your inner citadel. Guard your energy as you would guard your most precious possession, because it is your most precious possession. Choose carefully who receives the gift of your attention, your time, and your assistance. Not everyone deserves it, not everyone will appreciate it, and not everyone will use it well. The Stoic path is one of strength through discipline, peace, through wisdom, and love, through discernment. It is a path that honors both your own worth and the worth of others by refusing to participate in relationships that diminish either. It is a path that leads not to coldness but to warmth, not to isolation but to meaningful connection, not to selfishness but to the kind of self-respect that makes true service possible. Walk this path with confidence, knowing that the ancients have walked it before you and found it good. Trust in the wisdom that teaches you when to extend your hand and when to keep it at your side. And remember always that your greatest gift to the world is not your willingness to be used by those who would use you, but your commitment to remain strong, virtuous, and whole in a world that often rewards the opposite. The citadel stands. The path continues. The choice, as always, remains yours.